Then next I'm going to call Megan Bronner. And then if Stuart Cohn and Dana Soar can also be prepared.
Good evening, everybody. Hello, I'm Megan Bronner. I've spent most of my life as a Howard County resident. Right now, I live on Yorkshire Drive in Ellicott City. My daughter's a first grader at Bellows, so I represent the PTA there, and I'm also a PTA delegate to the Howard County PTA. But tonight, I stand on my own. I speak for myself, though I'd like to think I also speak for all the parents that have not had time to go through these agonizing notes that you all have created, which I'm so grateful for. But we've spent a lot of time trying to figure it out. And so I'm here for them as well, but again, officially speak only for myself. At the November hearing, we heard mostly from education advocates and affordable housing. It was almost as if the two were pitted against themselves. And I absolutely reject that notion. And I don't like that it's happening. There must be a third way. Usually affordable housing and education, we're both the Davids in Goliath's world. We're usually on the same side. So I insist that there must be a third way that won't crowd the schools and yet allows for more affordable housing. And when considering then who is the Goliath in this situation, it would have to be someone that makes profit, and the profit would be for developers. Now, I'm not against development either. Construction has really been important to my extended family, as is development. So I understand the needs of the industry. I want to bring new people to Howard County. I support growth, but it has to be sustainable, and it absolutely has to be funded. And that UPP model is not doing it for me. Even in the walkthrough, if we looked at that $25K additional, that's not even covering one student for 1 year in Howard County. We're at like $19,000 or something that we spend for each student. So I'm not sure what's going to happen when that child enters first grade after kindergarten. I know it's not a one-to-one, but that example stands. And I'm looking at the way that the votes have been made over these past times. It's kind of funny. Bless your heart, Brett. I see that you were voted down almost every time. That concerns me because I know Brent is an education advocate. And seeing those votes so skewed gives me pause. It's a red flag for me. And also, basing our model on Montgomery County also gives me pause. I didn't get a chance to look at the news this morning, but as of last night, I think they were about to approve taking $50 million out of the retirement and trust fund in order to fund schools, because otherwise they would have had to increase the income tax, but no one wanted that. The fact that they're in a position where they're either raising an income tax or borrowing from trust funds doesn't make me keen on following this model. But if it is to be this model where we stop waiting, which gives me pause in another regard, because even if we have funding but we don't have time to build, what are we going to do there? Regardless, but that gives me pause that we're using a model that isn't sufficient. So if we do UPP, it has to be a higher amount. Goliath is going to take a little bit more of a hit so that the Davids can stay in the game. Thank you so much. I know you've had a lot of meetings, and I bet they're super tedious, but I recognize the importance of this work. And please know that parents very much care. Thank you.
Stuart Cohn.
Good evening. I'm Stu Cohn from Skaggsville, and I'm the president of the Howard County Citizens Association, speaking for them. We give the APFO Committee credit for the time and effort spent to make recommendations for attempting to improve life in our county. However, we are concerned if this committee really cares about communication and interacting with the public. We ask because it seems that silence from you, not allowing any questions or comments at these hearings, is the norm pertaining to the public meeting, as was the last. I'm sorry to say this, folks. Of the 96 comments received at the first public hearing, how many will be incorporated in your current or future recommendations? We don't know. I was a member of the previous APFO committee. After 8 years, the acronym of the APFO should change to ALPO, a lousy public ordinance. It will continue to remain lousy because the measurements for protection of schools, roads, quality of life issues have not worked and requires it to be much stricter. How will the current 10 recommendations better the situation? will you have the courtesy to respond? With your proposed school recommendations, will we see complete redistricting elimination or additional trailers? We believe no school capacity should exceed 100% for any tier. No additional trailers should exist for overflow and should be counted as overcapacity. The level of service of roads should only pass at a service level higher than a D because of the volume of continued congested traffic and the proliferation of development. Will there be any recommendations by this committee to the council to include fire, emergency medical services, the police, the Johns Hopkins Howard County Medical System, utilities and stormwater, etc.? Will this committee make any recommendations to the county council regarding any of these quality of life issues? If so, when will the public be informed so we may provide any comments? When we see road signs stating, quote, "Stay alert, traffic congestion next 3 miles," unquote, and schools with nearly 250 trailers, we ask you, should you have major concerns? The answer is yes. Developers should not be permitted to get a free get-out-of-jail card after 4 years, ignoring schools' declared overcapacity. We need to avoid the heartburn of redistricting. Furthermore, there should be no housing exemptions for APFO. We do not support eliminating the weight and having fees paid instead. Having higher fees closer to the actual cost of the impacts on development should happen without eliminating the weight of crowded school requirements to assist in their budget planning. We hope you will take the necessary action for APFO to once and for all really stand for an awesome public facilities ordinance, which we can all be proud. Thank you for at least listening, as your silence to the public is not golden, but your actions will be pivotal in the future of our county. Thank you. Any comments? No.
So-
Terrible.
Dana Soar, Terry Marcus, and then Liz Krause.
Good evening. I'm Dana Soar from Columbia. I moved to Howard County in 1984 and raised my family here. Today I work with Bridges to Housing Stability, so I have a direct understanding of how our county's housing policies are failing many vulnerable residents. And for that reason, I'm also a member of the Housing Affordability Coalition. Our community is long overdue in taking meaningful steps to address our housing crisis. In 2010, we first recognized the issue publicly during the formulation of Plan Howard. We acknowledged the problem again in 2019 as we began development of the Housing Opportunities Master Plan. And HOCO by design, our current general plan, was in many ways centered around the imperative to add more missing middle and other affordable housing so that we can meet the needs of our workforce, young adults, seniors, and neighbors with disabilities. Unfortunately, since 2018, APFO has constrained the expansion of our housing supply to levels far below our needs. Since then, we've added fewer than 1,000 homes a year, a growth rate well under 1%. The result, a worsening housing shortage that drives home prices and rents ever upward. Thanks to our housing shortage, many seniors are stuck in place with nowhere in the community they can downsize. Thanks to our housing shortage, many essential members of our workforce now pay more than 50% of gross income to their landlords. And thanks to our housing shortage, so many young adults are forced to leave Howard County once they're out of school. Our community has made a big collective investment in their education, and yet they're unable to afford a home here. So they take that education and their talents and they move elsewhere, and they become the backbone of other communities, not ours. What a loss for Howard County. We should be getting a better return on our huge investments in education by making space, housing space, for more of our young adults. Meanwhile, in the years that housing development has been throttled, student enrollment in our schools has declined, and it's projected to remain flat for the next decade. Overall, the school system is under capacity today. For these reasons, I support this committee's recommendation to end the waiting period for new housing and replace it with higher fees on new housing developments in areas where schools are over capacity. In this way, housing development can proceed and the school system can receive additional revenues to expand capacity if and when it's needed. As a member of the Housing Affordability Coalition, I'd also like to see the recommendation amended to exempt affordable housing from those additional fees so that housing doesn't get any more expensive than it already is. Thanks for your time, and a shout out to all of you for doing all this hard work that you're putting in to develop sensible recommendations around APFO. Good night.
Terry Marcus.
Good evening. I'm Terry Marcus, the president of the PTA Council of Howard County. I'm here as a representative for the more than 10,000 PTA members in this county. Let me start by saying that there are a lot of things about APFO that I don't know, but here's what I do know. First, the purpose of APFO is to ensure that there are sufficient public facilities as our population grows. They are designed to slow the pace of development or even delay it until adequate service levels are in place. If there is a desire to remove those constraints, then there must be a funding source to remedy whatever the constraint on growth is. Second, the purpose of this APFO review committee should have been on finding ways to increase and enhance our public infrastructure in all ways, not to diminish it, which looks to be the case based on this committee's voting record. Third, if your recommendations are not going to be strengthen APFO in any way, then at a minimum, you should refrain from weakening the laws we already have. The schools test needs to stay in place. Overcrowding is real. New developments and resales bring in new students. We are suburbia. People come here for the schools and are willing to pay top dollar for homes because of the schools. Shuffling students around every year via redistricting to maximize existing capacity to allow for new development is a short-term solution that only drives higher-earning families out of our school system and out of our county. Goodbye, tax base. We are not Montgomery County. We do not have the tax base of Montgomery County, and we should not be basing our APFO laws on what Montgomery County does. MoCo's UPP solution has not solved their financial woes. Why copy a school system plagued by overcrowding, frequent redistricting, and more than 550 classroom trailers, especially when their solution this year is to raise an employee retirement benefit fund of up to $50 million just to cover costs. Lastly, let me tell you what I do know about. I know about those funding sources that should be in place. Since last September, I've been on a task force with local and state elected officials assigned the job of finding ways to increase the pool of money available to our school system to fund capital projects. Do you know what we've come up with? Basically, nothing, other than requiring that a certain percentage of PAYGO funds be spent on the school system every year. We haven't come up with ways of increasing school funding. After the latest round of taxes coming out of Annapolis this year and sustained increases in different county taxes and fees over the past 6 years, no one has the appetite to raise money to dedicate to our schools. So state and local funding for schools is looking flat despite drastic increases in costs. Until everyone comes up with ways to maintain the so-called high standards of our school system, hands off eliminating the meager protections our current APFO laws provide. Thank you, and I hope to see some good work coming out of you still.
Councilwoman Young.
Thank you, Ms. Eisenberg. You didn't make me wait at all. Good evening. I'm going to have to stare at this. My eyes aren't that good anymore. My name is Deb Young, and I am the County Council member for District 4. And I am here to testify before you tonight. I am here tonight to request that you consider preserving the APFO school test as a vital tool in balancing growth from new development within the constraining factors of escalating school construction costs and limited construction dollars. The state-approved specifications for educational facilities results in a cost of $495 per square foot to build. This cost will likely increase to $500 per square foot in the near term. The last elementary school that we built was Talbot Springs. It is a 90,000 square foot building and it costs $65 million. Middle schools are about 140,000 square feet and cost $101 million to build. Guilford Park Our newest high school is 289,000 square feet and costs $209 million, plus site acquisition costs. Building new schools is not cheap, and we lack county-specific autonomy to negotiate lower square footage costs. We are also constrained by the state's funding schedule for new school construction. Every year, HCPSS determines how to maximize available state dollars with available matching funds from the county in an effort to make a dent in the backlog of aging, overcrowded schools, especially in the southeast and the northern school districts. If the state provided more upfront funding to match our needs, then the county could leverage more funds, and we would be able to build schools at a much faster pace. If more funds were available from the state, then the open-closed school chart would show much less red, and new developments would be able to proceed without as much impediment from the APFO school tests. This is not what happens because state and county funding is limited each year, and for this reason, APFO, as a growth control, is working. It allows for growth to be phased with limited annual funding. The proposal to allow developers to use a pay-to-play option will not counterbalance the funding constraints. The capacity contributions of a new development would need to be translated into a square footage cost, and the remaining state and county funds would need to be readily available to appropriately time the opening of a new school with the resulting students coming from a new neighborhood. Without these cost calculations and timing considerations, the current pay-to-play proposal is merely an opt-out token that provides preferential treatment to certain developers over those who patiently waited for their turn for decades. Thank you.
Lisa Kraus. And then after that, Kevin Bruning and Benjamin Schmidt.
Good evening, Chair and committee members. I am Lisa Kraus, a board member with the River Hill Community Association, a Columbia Village, and I'm here tonight with Kevin Bruning, the chair of our committee. Tonight I'm speaking on behalf of our board. The Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance in Howard County was created to require that real estate development progresses at a pace that ensures top-quality schools and public services. The River Hill Community Association Board, hereafter the board, would like to offer its recommendations to the committee. As a community of over 8,000 people, we want to see the continuation of great schools and well-thought-out development that does not create strain on limited resources. In fact, APFO and its growth management process should go farther than its current mandate. APFO should promote smart growth in Howard County regarding housing development, public education, water management, and broader public services. We recommend the committee take the following steps to ensure that Howard County retains its high quality of life for residents, families, and businesses. Number one, review the APFO regulations more frequently in order to accurately base county development projections on true needs. Number two, maintain that all-important school capacity test as is. This common sense policy has been the core of APFO, and it is effective in avoiding overcrowding. It's needed in order to maintain the high quality of our public schools, the jewel of Howard County. UPP should not be a replacement for this test. Number three, demand that developers pay their fair share to prevent overdevelopment and provide the best for our schools and public services. A county like ours deserves that 100% of the school surcharge fee cover all needed Howard County school system infrastructure costs, with these costs borne by added development. This, at a minimum, will maintain the current standard of use in the schools, that's our current level of educational investment, and protect our AAA bond rating. As such, this will sufficiently reduce demands on our school system's operating budget and make for better schools. Number 4, extend APFO regulations and tests to limited public resources, specifically public safety like hospitals, police, fire, and rescue services. Additionally, to items in the capital budget like libraries, county roads, bridges, parkland, and recreational facilities. And our 5th recommendation, limit, restrict, or eliminate exemptions for developers. In closing, Howard County has one of the highest standards of living in the country. That standard of living is not inexpensive. As citizens, we do demand the best schools, high teacher pay, and ease of movement across the county and functional available water resources. There's no reason to scrap the school test in lieu of an underfunded UPP. So we thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for listening to our recommendations. I think I reached my time, right? Oh, pretty much. Okay.
Thank you.
Kevin Bruning?
Good evening, I'm Kevin Bruning, and I'm the chair of the River Hill Community Association, but tonight I'm speaking on behalf of myself. And my comments will be relatively brief. I think Lisa did a great job explaining, I think, how a lot of our community feels about the current APFO and maintaining how it currently is structured. Much of the county has been developed over the last 20 years, and such, this commission should look to add components to APFO versus taking them away. As of the last read, there are 5 schools with an FCI score over 60, indicating that they're in severe need of renovation. Inflation now has renovations at over $500 per square foot, at least getting there close to it. The school system has had, at least as of last read, 262 trailers. Howard County Public School System is constantly struggling to find funding for their capital budget. So as the county has developed, HCPSS deferred maintenance has been the norm. We don't need tiers. You simply need to have developers to pay the higher school surcharge base amount, probably 2.5 times what it is today. That's for you to determine. HCPSS has continually placed top in the state for reading and math. The APFO school tests for overcrowding are, in my opinion, the main reason why. Tiers will lead to HCPSS schools having become more overcrowded, and standard test scores in the county, unlike Carroll and other counties around the state, where we've seen those increase compared to Howard County. So I think this is an issue of just how competitive the school systems are, and we have to keep in mind that people can choose where they want to live. There is a recent article from the Baltimore Banner stating that there were over 200,000 people that left Maryland with a net influx of 170,000 from people that were undocumented or people that were residents of different countries to this area. So a net 30,000 is what we saw as a loss. But we continue to see Howard County property values increase. And why is that? And the reason is because people want to live here mainly for the schools. There are a lot of other reasons, such as the parkland, open space. And so we should continue to embrace those, and we should maintain APFO the way it is. Thank you.
Next is Benjamin Schmidt, then Jackie Ng and Kat Carter.
Good evening, I'm Benjamin Schmidt, residing near Bellows Spring Elementary School in Ellicott City, and currently the president of the Howard County Education Association. I'm testifying about APFO and the changes we believe are needed in Howard County. The school system is the economic driver of the county. HCPSS is the largest employer and provides many wraparound services to both students and parents. However, we have seen that the pace of development is not generating enough revenue to keep up with both the county infrastructure and the needs of the school system. Educators are the first to notice the impact of new development, as many of their classrooms are already bursting at the seams. Just the number of elementary students on the playground at recess causes significant safety concerns. More kids, less money and resources, higher class sizes all add to an overflowing plate of responsibilities for our educators that is never attainable. There's nothing wrong with individual landowners wanting to sell their land to developers or developers making profits. However, we can't allow exorbitant profits to be made on the back of our school system while HCPSS struggles with $800 million in deferred maintenance, portables to accommodate capacity, and again, large class sizes. There isn't a current plan to deal with the maintenance backlog and no clear path for erecting new schools that are necessary, or additions to existing ones. Instead, members of the county government, the school system, and the Board of Education argue over who's at fault and what needs to be done to fix it. Pay to play is not the way. Although every fix requires money, the fees developers paid for years was far below surrounding jurisdictions, while the average house price in Howard has skyrocketed. Both land and building material prices are comparable to other counties, but the same house here can demand more than triple the asking price than other places, all while developers are paying the county less. Fix this. We agree change is needed immediately, but we cannot have pay-to-play in order to build outside the capacity test. And we cannot continue discussing schools being over 100% capacity, as that is simply antithetical to what our students learn in math class every day. Revenues must cover infrastructure needs, building schools, along with better and safer access to them, and the employees of the school system that continue to make Howard County the attraction it is for families. Thank you.
Jackie Ing.
Good evening. Jackie Yang, live in Cooksville. I'm testifying this evening on behalf of the Housing Affordability Coalition, which is composed of 40 member organizations over 1,000 members and allies. At the November APFO public hearing, the coalition offered 2 recommendations for your consideration. The first was to incentivize development of affordable housing. The second was to identify new revenue sources to stimulate development and to pay for school system maintenance and expansion. The coalition appreciates and supports the committee taking an important step toward both reducing barriers to development and increasing revenues for schools by recommending replacement of the APFO schools test with the utilization premium payment, the UPP. While the UPP proposal would allow housing to proceed without delay, which the coalition wholeheartedly endorses, we're struggling with supporting a fee increase, knowing that this added expense could be a development disincentive and will most certainly increase the cost of new housing, driving up prices for buyers of new and existing homes and raising rents. Higher rents will have an outsized negative impact on the people in our community who most need affordable housing. The coalition therefore strongly urges the committee to make the following additional recommendation in its final report to help ensure that affordable rental housing is significantly incentivized. Exempt affordable housing from the surcharge and apply the UPP surcharge only to new market rate housing. In addition to the above requests, the coalition conveys its support for the adoption of the affordable housing definition as proposed in recommendation 10, 60 to 120% of Howard County median income for sale housing, and 0 to 60% of Howard County median income for rental housing. In closing, we commend each and every one of you for your service on the committee and your commitment to helping ensure that Howard County's adequate public facilities ordinance reflects and will help respond to current day infrastructure realities. Thank you.
Kat Carter. And then after that will be Ryan Powers.
Good evening, members of the APFO Review Committee. My name is Kat Carter. I serve as the VP of Advocacy for the PTA Council of Howard County, PTAC, a member of the Howard County Public School System Security Task Force, Strategic Planning Committee, and the Operating Budget Review Committee. I'm also a parent, consumer advocate, and active community member speaking tonight in my personal capacity. I'm here to urge you to preserve and strengthen the APFO. It is a vital safeguard and will ensure growth doesn't outpace the capacity of our schools, roads, and emergency services, or can ensure. But it must evolve to reflect the growing strain on our infrastructure. Some argue that higher developer contributions, essentially pay to play, can solve our school capital funding needs. But funding school construction is not a simple transaction. The process is long and political and layered, as talked to by a council member. And also, it even requires the land acquisitions and data-driven planning by the Board of Education and redistricting, both which are difficult and slow. While all these processes play out, our students sit in crowded classrooms and our community deals with congested roads, which have increased because more people are going back to work in person, and long wait times for emergency services. I want to share a lesson I learned the hard way. A few years ago, I tried to grow a garden and raise chickens free range, no fencing, no pesticides, no protection. I believed they could coexist peacefully in the surrounding forest. But predators took the chickens, deers, bugs, and rabbits decimated my garden. It wasn't out of malice. It was just their nature. So I adapted. I built fences, netting, and a secure coop. Now everything thrives in balance, but it still requires careful monitoring and adaptation. Our county is no different. Development can add value to our community's ecosystem, but only if we create boundaries and protections. Otherwise, we open ourselves to an imbalance that harms families, students, and community. Advocates across this county share bold visions of education, housing, transportation, healthcare, but no matter how well-intentioned we are, we cannot expect market forces or deer or developers to go against their nature. We have seen examples of this throughout our county. Thoughtful, enforceable policy is what turns vision into sustainable reality. Please reject efforts to weaken APFO, improve APFO to be more efficient and adaptable. Enforce existing developmental pacing, expand APFO to include broader public infrastructure and services, which are significantly being impacted right now. Please put our community's safety, education, and long-term well-being first by reinforcing, not relaxing, the essential protections that keep Howard County's ecosystem in balance. Responsible development is a vital part of that ecosystem, just as predators and deer are part of the forest. But without fencing, netting, and safeguards, my chickens and garden didn't stand a chance. The same is true for our schools and public services. Growth must be managed with care, or it will overwhelm the very systems that make Howard County thrive. Thank you.
Next up is Ryan Powers.
All right, good evening. So first, thank you for serving. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. But I do wish you sent out a survey in order to hear all the voices in our community. The Howard County Flag Committee did that. Other committees do that. I think the Flag Committee got about 1,200 responses. I'm not sure. That's a lot more people than are here tonight. You need to have a survey so you can actually hear from the community. Instead, you only have the input from a small selection of us. We all could have used everyone's thoughts and ideas because now you get mine, and I think you've made a poor decision regarding APFO. Mostly I'm concerned that you have made an intentional decision to allow overcrowding of the schools. Many of you may say and do say school enrollment is flat, but you ignore pre-K mandates from the blueprint. And we know that while private pre-K is supposed to provide 50% of the spots, Howard County is not even close. I think 10%, not even close. But if you truly thought that the HCPSS is in stasis, enrollment doesn't matter, why does it matter then if we have a school waiting bin? If development isn't affected by additional students, Why not keep the current system and charge for building in areas with overcapacity schools? Instead, you're choosing to intentionally overcrowd schools with unmitigated development. And is that really smart growth that our county likes to say with its buzzword? Second, I hear all this talk about revenue generation from the new model. Have you done the calculations on seat cost per student? I'm sure you have. I haven't seen it. I've tried to do it myself. A new elementary school in the southeast will cost $64.5 million and have 490 seats for a total per student cost of $131,000 per student. So in your example below, where you get $25,000 additional revenue from 6 of these houses, that's going to generate 3 students. You'll get about $8,000 extra dollars. You're nowhere close. Using the highest tiers that you have and assuming apartments, which are the lowest student generation, the additional charges you're proposing come, nowhere close to paying for the infrastructure costs of this rampant development. These additional funds are also not a dedicated revenue stream for HCPSS, okay? They go into the general fund, just like the current school impact fees. So they're not necessarily being spent on schools, and you have no guarantee that they will be. This approach of choosing money over students is a penny wise and pound foolish. If housing development was actually maxed out to the current levels allowed in the housing allocation chart, and there's no reason to assume with Newtown development or Gateway and all the other stuff that it won't be, an average of 1,400 homes could be built every year using the low estimate of multifamily apartments found in the pupil yield report. This would generate 224 students every year. In short, Howard County, we need to build the equivalent of a Jeffers Hill Elementary School every 2 years in order to keep our students out of packed schools. I will send you the rest. Thank you for your time. I do appreciate your commitment.
Laura Wisely, and then Jade Chang.
Good evening. Thank you for being here and allowing me to speak. My name is Laura Wisely. I live in Elkridge, and I have 3 students at Guilford Park High School. And I am actually representing Elkridge Community Alliance tonight. Building houses boomed in the 80s in Howard County. It peaked at more than 5,000 building permits were issued in 1989. A few years later, in 1992, APFO was established. A third of Howard County schools were then built. We built 26 new schools over the past 30 years. The amount of density, AKA apartments, was dramatically increased since 2001, particularly in the Route 1 corridor. And we saw Duckett's Lane, Hanover Hills, Thomas Viaduct, and Guilford Park built along Route 1. Student yield prior to COVID was 0.5 per housing unit. District 1, Ellicott City, and Elkridge have the highest student yields per dwelling amongst all of the planning areas. HCPSS student attendance had steadily increased yearly until 2020. COVID. In 2021, we began to see the private school shift. Elkridge and Hanover felt this shift. We saw this in our affluent areas. This shift contributed to the tipping of the scales to more schools becoming eligible for Title I funding. Guilford Park redistricting then happened in 2022, which also created a private school shift. COVID was an unprecedented phenomena never experienced. Isn't it premature to base 10 years of APFO protections on flattened enrollment during the COVID bubble? I see enrollment inching back up. In fact, didn't we have around 450 new students just this year? That's the size of Jeffers Hill Elementary or Bryant Woods Elementary. What if it continues to inch up farther? We are away from the COVID bubble and we get a building boom from open APFO rules. ECA is nervous, and we feel this committee was not thorough enough in deliberations or options brought to the table. Disproportionate amount of hours were spent educating the members and not enough time solution finding. Education should have been self-study and meetings should have been work meetings. Decisions and deliberations were crammed into the last few meetings, and most discussion was cut off due to so many preconceived biases amongst the group. If we remove the pause on development, How many schools will that yield? Our land only allows us to build dense, but our society is also living more dense. Those with more needs tend to live dense. How will we adapt to a denser population? This pay-to-play proposal does not guarantee that the money generated will go to the school system for capital construction by the county government. And even if it does not guarantee that HCPSS will designate the funds to the community directly impacted. A prime example, there is no high school in all of District 1. Yet, Ellicott City and Elkridge generate the highest pupil yield of students in all of Howard County. If the APFO belt is loosened, the increased fees does not guarantee a seat in a school building. Present us the math that this proposal will pay for students to be placed back into the school buildings and out of the 200-plus trailers. ECA does not agree with the APFO committee proposals regarding schools. Thank you.
Jade Chang.
Dear APFO members, my name is Jade Chan. I'm a parent of 3 Howard County students, and I'm a resident of Ellicott City. I work for Centennial High School as a volunteer for the PTSA. I'm also Centennial High School's PTAC delegate. So the recent motion to remove the APFO school test and replace it with a UPP model, which refers to utilization premium payment model, greatly concerned me and our community. According to this model, the HCPSS school utilization criteria will be completely removed. The 4-year waiting period for the unapproved housing development projects will be eliminated, and the developers of residential units can buy their rights with money, bypass the 4 years waiting, and start to build houses without delays, without any considerations of our schools, and to potentially or even intentionally overcrowd the schools and cause more frequent redistricting. The most recent redistricting, or a prettier term, boundary review process and implementation, is happening right now. It is affecting 11 schools, including 6 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, and 2 high schools. Each redistricting greatly and adversely affects students, parents, families, and communities. Kids are forced to leave the school within walking distance, to leave their friends and their beloved teachers, and to be bused to another school that is further away from their home. In overcrowded schools, students use portables as classroom instead of the regular classroom, and the portables are outside the school buildings, which creates security risks, inconvenience to bathrooms, water fountains, school office, and everything else inside the buildings that they should have immediate access. In Centennial High School, even after it's been redistricted years ago, Centennial High School still has 9 portables. In Centennial Lane Elementary School, it's crowded with 44 pre-K kids, according to the blueprint mandate. And the entire 5th graders of Centennial Lane Elementary School are using portables without exception, the whole 5th grader. I urge the committee to prioritize the residents' education needs, to care about our students and communities' well-beings, and do not use money to deprive the community from their rightful choice of staying at their beloved local school comfortably or by forcing redistricting. Thank you.
Next up is Joe Horowitz, then John Lamb, and Joe Phillips.
Good evening, Joel Hurwitz. I live in Columbia. You earlier were asked if you were going to accept all the recommendations of everything you heard. I hope not, because they're contradictory. It's a hard problem, because as you heard, if you raise the price of housing, then the affordable housing is more expensive. If we had enough housing, assuming we lived in that world, then the price of housing would go down, but we'd be full of students. We just heard about people don't want redistricting, but, and Jen Mallow could tell me if I'm right, isn't it now required by the state delegation that we do more redistricting if they're going to get the state money? Can't have empty schools in wrong places and not have redistricting. We assumed that the waiting period works, but my understanding is a lot of the developers wait out the period and then build anyway. So the bin doesn't really do anything, and we don't get the schools built anyway. The 4 years based on what I've always thought was a misinterpretation of the takings clause, because if you could build anything like age-restricted housing, there's no takings. And I had researched several years ago having a buyout option, which some other jurisdictions had. So the UPP in principle does that, but I'm not sure about your math and the unintended consequences and whether it will just encourage more age-restricted housing, which then has a density increase, which I've never understood for, or having a community center. So how about a fee in lieu for the 50-plus centers? You've heard how we should just build the schools and not have redistricting. But let's assume we built all the schools, as we've seen in the last month of the budget discussions, we don't have the operating money to fund them. So how do we have an adequate public facility if we have an empty high school with no staff? Similarly, case we made for hospitals. Do we really need more hospital capacity, or do we need more staffing for the hospital? The MIHU debate over the years has been that we should get rid of the fee in lieu of. Rather, it seems we should have one that's higher enough to pay for it. For multimodal, you should deal with the traffic lights, the same reasons. And like the school test for buses, do we need more bus stops, or do we need more buses and drivers? And for the also support the fire and EMS, similar reasons for the schools. Thank you.
Next, John Lamb.
Hello, my name is John Lamb, and I live in King's Contrivance with my wife and 2 school-aged children, and I'm speaking on my own behalf. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. First off, as I have not fully gotten my head around how this process works, and I am neither an expert in running a school system nor an expert in running a local government, my comments will be general. I'm assuming positive intent among the board, the developers, the school system, and the general public. I wish to remind the committee that while we are using math to calculate the various factors involved here, that children are not numbers. While I have nothing against redistricting, busing, and other attempts to balance the students and facilities, children are not fungible across space and grade level as merely fillers of seats. Therefore, it is not unreasonable to wish for a sufficient number of schools in proximity to the students they serve, with small enough class sizes for teachers to address the needs of all learners. I briefly taught in the South Bronx in the early 2000s. My experience in that situation is that people in affordable housing might have the most need and benefit the most from smaller class sizes and appropriate facilities. These concerns should not be set in opposition to each other. I was a student in Sayville, Long Island in the 1980s and 90s, and I benefited from an abundantly funded school system appropriately sized to the school population. The head start that provided me there helped me thrive in college and in my current IT career, and I hope for the same for all children in Howard County. I acknowledge my presence in Howard County has in part contributed to the need for more housing. While children are not numbers, in fact, in economic terms, they might be considered an externality. If we invest in them sufficiently, the return on investment can far exceed the costs. It should be possible to balance the schooling and housing needs of the community with the opportunities for reasonable profit on the part of developers. I ask all present to make recommendations, keeping in mind we are all neighbors, and we owe each other the consideration that entails. Thank you very much.
John Lamb.
That was me.
Oh, sorry. Joe Phillips.
Hello, and thank you for giving us all a chance to speak, and as well as your service on the APFO Task Force. My name is Joe Phillips. I'm a Realtor with Howard County Association of Realtors, where we serve over 2,000 real estate professionals in Howard County. And we're here tonight to advocate for home ownership, in particular home ownership for what we all know as the missing middle. We've been and continue to be appreciative of Howard County's dedication to managing growth in a way that protects public infrastructure and quality of life. But we also applaud any assistance that the task force could provide to make it easier for working families to achieve home ownership and for our housing supply to keep up with rising demand. The reality on the ground is homes are becoming increasingly out of reach for too many residents. We're talking about teachers, first responders, healthcare workers, and even recent college graduates are struggling to find attainable housing in the county that they work in and love so much. According to the data that we've pulled from the MLS, the annual household income needed to purchase a home in Howard County is $161,000, which is the second highest in the state, right behind Montgomery County, as we all know. The median sold price for a home in Howard County is $630,000, but for many residents, these numbers are unattainable. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, the median household income in Howard County is around $147,000. The major missing piece is the missing middle housing. These are duplexes, triplexes, townhomes, and small-scale multifamily options that bridge the gap between single-family homes and high-density apartments. These housing types are critical to creating a diverse and resilient housing ecosystem, yet the current APFO structure and zoning limitations often make them nearly impossible to build. When APFO freezes developments due to school or road capacity, it halts not just growth but opportunity. It restricts moderate income families from home ownership, pushes young families further away from jobs and transit, and accelerates racial and economic segregation. A few things that our association feels would be more balanced and forward-thinking approach would be, number one, explicitly supporting missing middle housing, prioritizing and streamlining approvals for development proposals that include townhomes, cottage courts, duplexes, and other moderate density options, particularly those within existing communities or near transit. Number two, tie APFO relief to affordability and housing diversity, allowing projects that include a significant share of affordable missile-emitting housing and proceeds with mitigation plans rather than being shut down entirely by capacity triggers. Three, consider housing access as essential infrastructure. APFO must account not only for school seats and road widths, but also for the urgent need for infrastructure housing choices. Infrastructure challenges must be solved in parallel, not opposition to housing growth. Homeownership is one of the most powerful tools we as Americans have to build wealth, strengthen neighborhoods, and close equity gaps. Let's ensure Howard County remains a place where people of all incomes, backgrounds can put down roots, not just for those that can afford today's soaring prices. Thank you for your time and your leadership on this critical issue.
All right, next up is Jansen Evelyn.
Good evening. My name is Jansen Evelyn. I live in Columbia, and I'm speaking tonight on behalf of the Howard Progressive Project, a grassroots organization committed to building a more equitable, sustainable Howard County. I am also a parent with 2 children in the Howard County Public School System, where I am in the PTA on the Booster Club, and I have been fortunate to have coached my daughter's Girls on the Run in the past. Professionally, I serve as a Deputy Chief Administrative Officer in Anne Arundel County, where I oversee and implement land use, housing, and economic development policy. So I approach this work through a community lens, from a regional planning and policymaking perspective, but I'm also showing up tonight as a neighbor, as a father who cares deeply about how our community has to grow. Let me start with recommendations 7 and 8. Renaming the roads APF test to the transportation APF test. This is more than semantics. It reflects where we need to go as a county. In Anne Arundel County, we're moving in the same direction. We're introducing legislation this summer to modernize how we plan for transit, bike, and pedestrian infrastructure. This renaming helps shift the conversation from a cars-only mentality to a more complete, equitable transportation network. Next, I want to speak in support of recommendations 1 through 6, which replaced school moratoria with a utilization premium payment structure up. Right now, we're relying on a freeze-thaw cycle that doesn't actually solve our school overcrowding issues. It just delays housing and cuts off funding we could use to expand school capacity. As a policymaker, I've seen the limits of moratoria, and as a parent, I've seen the real consequences overcrowded classrooms have on our learning, on our children's learning, on student mental health, and on our already overburdened educators. Pause in development doesn't build classrooms. It delays progress and blocks housing that working families need. We also know, based on the data, that most enrollment growth isn't coming from new development. It's coming from turnover in existing homes. So when we freeze development, we're not solving the core issue, and we're missing out on impact fees and other tools that can help us adequately and actually respond. The tiered paired model is a better, more responsive tool. It lets us manage growth while generating the revenue we need to support our schools and infrastructure. It's not perfect, but it's better than what we currently have. These recommendations strike the right balance. Lastly, while we support recommendations 10, we suggest more clearly defining 60 to 20% AMI as workforce, housing, or attainable housing, and we urge you to consider exempting affordable and senior housing from APFO restrictions. These are urgent needs. I strongly encourage the committee to include these recommendations in your final report to the county executive and to the county council. I want to say thank you for your work in this volunteer role that is so clearly often thankless, and for the opportunity to speak tonight. Thank you.
All right, and our final person for this evening is Andre Gao.
Hi, good evening, dear APFO members. I'm a Howard County resident for the past 25 years, and I'm also currently volunteer in the school at PTSA. Over those years I live in Howard County, the school has always been overcrowded. All my children, they attended a school with portable classrooms. And I hear people are saying that when we built the house, the fees and the taxes will take care of the school capacity issue. But this never happens for those years I live in Howard County. I think if for elementary school student who can do the math, they will clearly know this doesn't work out. So we know that each new family will have about half a student to go into the school. Then we know that also that each student just every year will cost $18,000. So half a student is $8,000. How many of those houses that you built will pay the real estate tax of $9,000? And this is only for school. How about the first responders and other county services? So to make this work, each of the house need to pay over $10,000 property tax every year. And how many of the houses you built will make this math work? And then this is a situation getting even worse and worse. And now we have hundreds of millions of dollars of deferred maintenance for our schools. And we also know that our school budget shortfalls we see year after year. So this again contradicts for all those arguments. And so I encourage you to tighten the school capacity requirement, not to loosen it. And I also want to mention that many people like me working in Washington, D.C., commute every day for more than 3 hours. Why do we live in Howard County? Because we want to get a good education for our children here. If you get the public school system getting worse and worse, people like me will not live in Howard County, and you will lose the tax base. I also want to emphasize that the so-called affordable housing is not truly affordable without providing adequate school capacity. This is just like you build a house without running water. How can you say this is affordable? You just put a family in those houses with no adequate education, and if the children don't get a good education, they will always living in a situation that they will not earn enough money to pay the housing in the future for the children. So this, please be aware of this. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
With that, that'll close tonight's meeting. Thank you all for coming out. One note, the record is open until Friday the 23rd. So if you do want to follow up or present written testimony, you may do so. That's at the APFO at howardcountymd.gov website. That's the committee's website, or I'm sorry, email address. So feel free to do that if you'd like to.
Can I ask a question, please? How do we get feedback from what you heard tonight?
We'll be following up in our next meeting. So you're welcome to watch that meeting as we review tonight's testimony.